This is Justin.
And this is Haley, and you're listening to The Price of Avocado Toast.
We're a married millennial couple wanting to normalize conversations about money. We want to hear about your highs and your lows,
The do's and the don'ts on your path towards financial freedom.
All right, everybody, we are sitting down today with Jannese from the Yo Quiero Dinero brand and podcast and blog and side hustling extraordinaire. Thank you so much for taking some time today to chat with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You just do so many things. So I was excited to have you on our podcast because I want to talk about side hustling with you and passive income and all the things that you do, because I really think that our listeners, they're Toasties, by the way, that's their name. I think the Toasties could really benefit from hearing how to even get started with all of that. So that's kind of what I want to hone in on today with you.
Let's do it.
Can we kind of start off by you telling the Toasties a little bit about who you are, where you come from, what you do, because you do a lot of stuff.
I do. I the other day I was on another podcast and they asked me like, so what exactly is it that you do? And I'm like, I don't really know how I can summarize that in a sentence, but essentially I am a personal finance podcaster. I am a food blogger turned business owner. I was an engineer at one point in my life. I am a passive income and financial independence enthusiast. And I am out here just kind of preaching the gospel of money to especially women of color, because this is a topic that we really don't learn about. And the more I talk to people on the podcast and interact with folks that follow the platform, there's just this common narrative where money is very stigmatized. It's very taboo to even talk about it. So the mission of my platform is really to demystify, destigmatize the conversation around money and really empower the people who listen to the podcast to start questioning maybe all the narratives that we've been told about what we can actually talk about with money, what we can do with money, and most importantly, how we can use it as a tool to really create and live the life that we want.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, that was like about as good of a response as you could nail on
10
that
out
one.
of 10.
Yeah, that was rad. I'm just impressed because, when we were like in our debt-free journey, I had like 3 jobs that I was doing. And so many people are like, wow, you're really busy. And then, I'll see like your content and I'm like, no, that human is busy. Like that, there's so much. And I'm like, I don't know how you find the hours in the day to do it all. But you're doing it. And it's pretty rad to like watch your story and follow along.
Thank you. And it's important to insert the disclaimer that now as a full-time business owner, I have made investments to have people help me with this. But for 8 years of my journey, I was side hustling while working a 9-to-5, really just dreaming about one day becoming an entrepreneur. And it's not easy, right? Like anybody who sugarcoats the balancing those two things, and especially if you have children, you have a family, it is hard. And that's why I think a lot of people get intimidated about side hustling, because they're just like, I'm already exhausted with this job. How am I supposed to find the energy and the time to build a business on the side? But I promise you it's doable. It's just going to require a lot of strategic time management. And unfortunately, it's going to require you to say no to some things that maybe are a time suck in your life.
Yeah. I love that you are representation for women, and especially women of color, of what's possible. Because you were able to like quit your job and now you're making a significant amount of money. And I love the transparency online with kind of like, here's where I came from. This is what I did. There were 8 years of food blogging in the process. It's not like it happened overnight, but I just appreciate that transparency, because people, they're not seeing like, oh, this just happened overnight. Like you woke up, you had 40,000 followers and you're making well over 6 figures. That didn't just happen.
Right. That transparency is such a big part of why, I kind of put myself on the line. And I think it's important for women of color who are in these new spaces, who are just not used to seeing themselves represented in entrepreneurship and investing in financial independence. Like, we have to be transparent, because we have to let folks know that we did not wake up one day being a freaking money guru. Like I didn't know anything about investing until I was in my almost 30 years old. So the journey to getting there is just as important as the current situation.
Love that. So can you take us back to the beginning of your side hustle journey with the food blog? I know that you've had this for a really long time. I took your blog course. So blog boot camp. So I know all about your stuff, but I want you to share with people like where this idea got started, and did you kind of always have the idea of monetizing, or was it just something you wanted to do on the side?
Yeah, so I definitely did not plan on being a food blogger, did not plan most of the things that you see now as part of my brand. I went the very traditional route, which many people get from their parents, the advice, go to school, get a degree, get a job, work 40 plus years, retire at 65. Like that was the plan. And I was actually a pre-med student when I first started college. So my intention was to go to medical school and live the American dream, right? My parents are from Puerto Rico. They were high school sweethearts. They came to the mainland in the 1980s and they worked their way up from nothing. Like my dad came and joined the military, and that's how he was able to get somewhat of an education, but he didn't go to college. My mom didn't go to college. So I was the first child in my family, and I was given those instructions: go to school, get the job, do the things. And I did all of that. I followed in my father's footsteps because he's an engineer. And long story short, I decided not to go to medical school because I was just like, I'm tired of school. I don't want to get into more debt. So let me use this biology degree, which now is almost essentially useless, and try to spin this into an engineering career, which I was able to do. And I found myself around the age of 27, getting paid well, being a Latina in a space that is typically not something that you see often. And I did feel a lot of privilege around being in those rooms and being in those spaces, but I also felt very much unaligned with what I thought life should feel like. I was making a lot of money. I was completely unsatisfied with my career. And I was like, is this what we're going to do for like the next 40 years? Because I don't even like this work. I don't like this job. I tried moving to different employers, could not find the thing that I thought was going to make me happy. And so I was like in the throes of a quarter life crisis around the age of 27. I decided I need something other than this identity as an engineer. And so I started to think about like, what is it that I actually enjoy doing? I've always been a foodie. Like I've been in the kitchen since I was 11 years old with my mom. That's my place. That is my, whenever I need to disconnect from the world, I'm in the kitchen. So naturally I gravitated towards, okay, maybe I'm just going to like quit my job. I'm going to go to culinary school and like start over. Maybe this is the thing for me. And then I quickly found out that culinary school was going to add another like $40,000 to the 50 something thousand dollars in student loans that I already had. And we all know that the food industry is not the way to get rich, right? These people work on tips. You're grinding away 16 hours a day in a restaurant. So that quickly was not, feasible, especially when I thought about what did I actually want for my life. I wanted location independence. I wanted the ability to earn money online. I wanted the ability to work when I wanted to, not work when I didn't want to. And all of those things kept pointing me towards it was pretty new. Like the world of blogging back in 2013 was not something that was as commonplace as it is today. So I realized I was following a couple of bloggers like the Pioneer Woman, skinnytaste.com, but I didn't really see anybody doing blogging from like the Latin food perspective. So I started a blog, didn't know what the hell I was doing, did a lot of Googling, a lot of YouTubing, did not have a plan for monetizing. And that was just like a passion project for a couple of years. I had no idea where it was going to go until I started having content go viral on Facebook. Specifically, my Puerto Rican content started going super viral, like to the point that my website started crashing. And that's when I came to the realization that I was now creating content that was super in demand and for an audience that was not typically being served by the existing content. And that for me was the first light bulb moment that I'm like, maybe this could be something else. Because then I started getting companies reaching out to me to create sponsored content. I started monetizing my blog with ads because the traffic started to grow to the point where ad companies were now like, hey, can we put ads on your website? And where are we at? We're like 9 years later. This food blog, which was a passion project, is now, it earns over $100,000 a year in passive income, which is nuts.
That is absolutely nuts, but so freaking cool. That is
I
like
love it.
wild to hear somebody talk about that. Like, yeah, it was just kind of frustrated with my job and just wanted to do this thing as a passion project, and you committed to it and it grew. Like, it's really, really cool. And I think you're totally right. Like, there's not a lot of creators, I guess you could say, right, in the Latinx community that are like, or at least back then, that were getting the respect they deserve, right?
Yeah.
So if you're able to bring this fresh perspective and people are like, wait a minute, like that's something new that I haven't seen before, that's engaging or that's desirable, then yeah, it's absolutely gonna soar. That's just so rad.
And damn, her food looks good.
Yeah.
So Justin really likes to cook. He just told me recently, in the past year, we've been married for 3 years now, that he was the, what were you?
I was the president of the culinary club. in
Yeah,
high
and I was
school.
like, what? How did I not know this? So I gotta hook you up with some of her recipes so you can cook them for me.
Yeah, for sure. We're not like the white people that think ketchup is spicy. So I think we could hopefully handle it.
Absolutely.
No, it looks bomb.
Good. So I kind of want to ask, like, growing up, did you have an entrepreneurial spirit? Because I mean, like you said, like you didn't see a lot of like Latina, entrepreneurs. So it's not like you had somebody to look up to. Did you have that ever in your back pocket? Was that something you ever like tinkered with, or was it really kind of just stem from starting the blog and that growing to something?
It's funny. I think back now and I realize that entrepreneurship is a thing that's been in my family for generations. And it's not something I saw in my immediate family because both of my parents have traditional 9 to 5 jobs, but that's because their parents were entrepreneurs and didn't want that instability for them. So they got that messaging. My grandmother on my father's side was actually a bodega, or like a little convenience store owner in Puerto Rico. She went to school up to the 3rd grade. So she didn't
Wow.
have an education to actually have a fulfilling career. And entrepreneurship for her was something that happened out of necessity. The same thing on my mom's side. So my grandmother was a seamstress for 30 plus years. And once factories started closing in Puerto Rico, she was left without a job. So what she did, she took her seamstress skills and she opened a little tailor shop in her home, and she would do custom dresses and hemming people's pants and doing things like that. And up until this day, she still supports herself with that and, the meager
Wow.
Social Security checks that you get. So I realized like entrepreneurship is in my veins. I just wasn't aware of it until now and kind of digging into that history. And I almost feel like I wasn't going to be able to avoid this. Like it's been genetically programmed into me. It's
Yeah.
just shown up in a different form.
Yeah, my twin brother read a book recently with his wife, and I'm gonna butcher the title, but it's something like "It Didn't Start with You," and it kind of talks about how like generational things get passed down, whether we like kind of recognize it or not, because we all kind of carry these things with us, and they get passed to our children and stuff. And so I very much believe that that's kind of where that stemmed from. Like maybe your parents pushed you to do something else because they didn't want that instability, or they wanted you to like push towards the American dream because they worked so hard. But it's cool to think like it probably was genetic. Like there's like some bone in your body that's like, this is not for you, there's a different way. That's pretty rad.
Us millennials were told one thing and where we needed to go, the path we needed to get on to get there. And we just did a podcast episode recently with Gabby Dunn, and they said, the Gen X, are those the people behind us?
Yeah.
They're just like,
no,
nah.
Gen X is in front of us. Is it
Gen
Gen Z?
Z behind
Gen Z's
us.
behind
So
us,
the
yeah.
younger folks, they're like, nah, I don't want to work so hard. Like I see the millennials hustling, and this is just not my jam.
Yeah.
I just don't want to do it. And we're over here like, wait, what? Like
Yeah.
this whole thing that you told us, like this isn't really the perfect American life dream that we've all thought it was gonna be. Like why?
Who
And then
knew?
now I'm seeing people
Yeah.
in their 30s revamping and doing complete career changes and just shifting the whole trajectory. So I think that's so cool to see people doing shifts, because it's okay to change your mind and not be locked in the same job for 30 years. I mean, no, one does
and
that
especially
anymore.
when a lot of us are forced to make that decision at 18 years old. Like I didn't know what the hell I wanted in my
Exactly.
life at 18. I barely know what I want, and I'm 36 years old. So it's just like to make such a monumental decision that's going to shape the rest of your life is kind of insane if you really think about it.
Yeah, that should be
1000%. Yeah, and then on top of that, it's like you're not only making this decision that shapes your life, but you're also accruing thousands in debt because of it.
Oh,
Like if you were just making a decision, finances, removed from it, that might be one thing. But like the ramifications of it are so wide
Yeah.
sweeping.
yeah,
So wide sweeping.
totally.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you some questions about your streams of income, if you're comfortable kind of sharing and breaking those down. I know that you have multiple streams of income. Can you kind of just share like the main ones, or I mean, if you know all like 20 of them, go ahead.
I always have to write this list
and then-
down because some people inevitably get lost.
Yep, and then like which ones have turned into passive income for you?
Okay, so now I have 2 blogs because with my personal finance brand, I have that as a separate wing. So when it comes to the food blog, I don't technically blog anymore. The existing content is there and it's kind of just churning, getting traffic, making money. So that's definitely one of the top sources of income, and it's 100% passive at this point. As far as what I'm doing with Yo Quiero Dinero, I have digital downloads, digital courses, virtual workshops, freelance writing, affiliate marketing. I work with financial professionals and get referral commissions from them. I do have blog ads on that blog too. I have podcast ads because I have a podcast. And the list goes on, and I know I'm forgetting things on that list, but that's a little bit of how I earn income there. And the digital course and digital download thing is another 6-figure income stream. Some of it is passive because I have, downloads and like on-demand videos that you can purchase and that don't require me to actively show up and teach. And then I also have like boot camps like the one that Haley took, where I'm going in each week teaching folks who join the programs. So if I did a calculation maybe 2 or 3 months ago around like what that percentage is of passive versus active income, and it's around 60% active, 40% passive.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, which it's enough. Like I make enough passive income to literally like not have to do any of the extra stuff. But it's just, that's the beauty, I think, of passive income, is like knowing that you have that cushion. It allows you to explore things that maybe you just wouldn't have the time to do, or you don't have the capital to do because you're just worried about like paying the bills. But now that I don't have to worry about that, I'm like, I could take on whatever freaking projects I want. I can decide, hey, I'm going to take the year off and write a book and on some freaking island or whatever. And just having those, having that ability is like super powerful. And that's why I love talking about passive income.
That's super cool. Do you think that you have a pretty strong value or tie-in to work? Because I think a lot of people would be like, it's all passive, I can just step away. But it seems like you kind of push for like, what's the next thing? What else can I like dive into? What else can I learn about? What else can I, examine? Do you find that in yourself?
Yeah, I am a natural learner, and I don't feel like I would ever be the type of person that could retire 100%. I think that's one of the frustrations that like people have with folks who are like in the FIRE movement, which I definitely do identify as somebody who's pursuing or has achieved financial independence at this point. But the retirement part, I feel like you stagnate as a person. Like if you're just not learning, trying new things, just explore. The world is such an amazing place to explore, and our potential is limitless. So I'm just like, nah, I don't ever see myself getting to a place where like, I don't want to do anything except, lie face down on the grass and just like contemplate the meaning of life. But if that's your jam, I mean, like, kudos to you. Like we work hard. And that's just not my thing.
Well, I think it says a lot about FIRE for you. Everyone has their own interpretation of what financial independence means. And a lot of people shit on the FIRE movement. They're like, why would you want to just retire at 30 years old and then just do nothing for the rest of your life? Like, let's help you find something that is fulfilling, something that you never want to retire from.
Right.
But you recently just took off, correct me if I'm wrong, like the whole entire month of December. And didn't you go to another country for a while and hang out on the beach?
Yeah, I booked a random trip to Puerto Rico and was like, why not? And just having the ability to book last minute vacations and take time off is just such a big part of why I wanted to do all of this. And especially like building that passive income. I actually was able to take 6 weeks off, and every day my stuff was making money. The blog was making money. I was selling products passively. And it's just like, when you realize how many different ways there are to earn money, especially because of the internet, you really start to question a lot of these traditional narratives that we've been told about what it actually means to work.
Yeah. I'm a teacher. Haley's a teacher as well, but she's financial coaching now. And I saw this really interesting Twitter thread the other day where a teacher who does credit recovery basically hosts a class where students, who need to make up work come in. And a sophomore was in that class working on a tablet, and the teacher went over and saw a bunch of woodworking stuff and was like, "What is all this?" And the kid said, "Well, this is my business." When the pandemic shut down, this 14-year-old started a woodworking
Oh
business
my
and was
God.
earning more than his teacher was now. And, this 15-year-old who's in credit recovery is like, why do I need high school? I'm making more money than my teacher. Like, he would come to school just to get on the school's Wi-Fi to sell his products and to
Wow.
build his website and all of this stuff. And you're right. It just shows you, like, with the boom of the internet and all of these online products and things you can do, why are we funneling kids and adults into positions that don't fulfill them
Into
or
a
don't bring them
box.
happiness? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also a teacher, but like Justin said, I'm not a classroom teacher at this very moment. We had some kids really close in age, 18 months apart, and I decided to step away from that and launch a financial coaching business. And I'm about to be 6 months in, and my take home income is extremely close to reaching what my teaching take home income was. And I just got started.
Wow.
So I'm sitting here, like you said, questioning everything like, okay, I can still be a teacher in a different realm. I can teach people, I can teach adults, but do it my own way. And then the income possibilities are literally endless. Or it could
Absolutely.
go back to teaching and fit in a box and make the same amount of money, and then you cap out and that's it. So it's just very interesting to really sit down and question those things. And
Yeah.
possibilities are endless for sure.
Absolutely. I think millennials are the first generation that are really experiencing the power of the internet and just the ability to earn income in ways that, I mean, we weren't even able to predict that, right? I think back to
Yeah.
like when I sent my first email, I think it was like 14 years old. And I'm just like, now we're talking about the metaverse and like virtual real estate and NFTs and cryptocurrency and freaking like what is next? I just can't even imagine like what work and how we earn money is going to continue to evolve as technology evolves because they're intricately linked, I think, at this point.
Yeah. 1000%. I'm currently building a unit in one of my classes structured around ancient Greece that's like totally virtually game based. So my students will do a lot of learning from this website that I've built because I'm realizing like that's their mode of learning. That's what, is enticing to them rather than me stand in the front and give some type of a lecture or something like that. So you're right. Like the future is going to be wildly different, and it's
Yeah,
kind of important that people get on board now
for sure.
because there's a high possibility people could be left behind from some
Hmm.
things.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to ask what advice you might give somebody who's like just diving into their side hustle, or maybe that's like a year in and is facing some adversity, or maybe is like struggling to empower themselves or feel like they're doing okay. What would you say to that person?
So, starting off with the folks who are just thinking about starting a side hustle but haven't necessarily launched, I think it's important to know that just because you are good at something doesn't necessarily mean that that needs to be the thing that's your side hustle. Like, I was a
Oh,
great engineer, okay? And I'm like, there's no way in hell that I'm going to open some consulting firm and like do that for myself. I don't even like doing it for somebody else, right? So, if you find yourself in a career that is completely unaligned with what you envision for yourself, that is okay. That's when you start looking at what do you do outside of your job? What do you do for fun? What do you find really interesting? What are those topics that you want to learn more about that you can't get enough of, that you love watching videos about and reading about and listening to podcasts about? That's what it was for me when I decided to start my personal finance podcast. I was obsessed with podcasts. I was listening to them for years and I just kept craving like, who are the Latinas? Where are the Latinas? Who is talking about this? Who I can identify with? And I didn't find anybody. And that's where that idea was sparked. Again, with the food blog, I loved cooking. I could do it all day, every day. That's my jam. So that's again another area where I decided to focus in on when it comes to a side hustle. So taking a look at your professional skills and your personal skills, making a list of both of those things and start circling literally which ones would you love to do, and also ask your friends and family, like, what are you known for? What's the thing that they always come to you asking questions about? What is the thing that people identify with you? Those are some good places to start as far as inspiration. Now, if you've already taken the leap and you are in your first year of entrepreneurship, doing the side hustle thing, congratulations, because it is hard. It is scary. There's so much mindset work that has to happen when you decide to start showing up for yourself, putting an offer out there, doing social media posts, whatever it is that you are trying to do to start to gain traction. Understand that you're going to be faced with a lot of inner criticism, a lot of self-doubt, especially if people around you don't understand why the hell you're doing something. When I started my personal finance podcast, I was doing it for a while. My mom's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? You know, she's like, what do you mean you're teaching people about money? You know, and it's just like, nobody has to get why you're doing what you are doing. It's up to you to decide, does this matter to you enough to stick with it and make it work? So getting with a group of people, that could be virtual people that you meet on Instagram, that could be real life people if you're lucky enough. You need a community of people that's going to help you, you know, get out of that rut, give you the pep talk that you need. And that's been something that's really important to me. So I have a circle of entrepreneurs who are also Latinas who, you know, when I'm having a shitty day and somebody's like, you know, nagging in my DMs or whatever, I'm just like, I don't want to do this anymore. They're like, girl, relax. It's going to be fine. This is all part of it. Right. Like just having that cheer squad, if you will, that's going to push you and encourage you. Super important. And I think it's also important to know, like, you can evolve as an entrepreneur, right? Just because you were told at 18 that you got to pick a career and that's what you got to do for the rest of your life, entrepreneurship is not that. It is an evolution. I went from a food blogger to now a personal finance podcaster. Somehow I became a speaker. Somehow I became a freelance writer. Now I'm writing my first book. Like, I didn't have any of this shit planned. Okay. And I think it's okay to know that things will come and ideas will come. And the only thing that stops you from pursuing them is you thinking like, well, this doesn't fit the idea of what I thought I was supposed to be doing. Let go of the idea and let it come to you as it comes, and follow those crumbs, because you never know what you could create unless you give yourself the opportunity to explore those things.
That was so good.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of, you know, listening to you talk about people nagging in your DMs or that kind of like self-doubt. There's that idea, like, build your brand big enough to get haters, right? Like, I think if you have people that are, you know, hating on your stuff, like, you're probably doing something right. Like, you're growing to where it's touching maybe even people that are outside of your own echo chamber or something like that. Like, it's pretty rad. I think a lot of people are going to resonate too with just like, find something that you're passionate about, and it doesn't matter like what the outside world is speaking about. If you're passionate about it and you can just believe in yourself enough to continue pushing forward, like, it's one day at a time, and it's, you know, little steps towards it. And you can always, like you said, evolve or reevaluate, but you shouldn't be the one. Don't let yourself be the one shutting it down.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's that self-rejection. Like, let the people who you're trying to serve let you know if you're on the right track, because they will be like very much confused if you're not offering, you know, what is it that they actually want from you. But the more you get good at listening to what people are asking you about, you start interacting with your audience, you start trying things and experimenting, eventually you will figure it out. But you just have to give yourself enough permission and time to like really hone those things.
I really like what you said about asking friends and family, like, what am I good at? What could you picture me doing? Because Justin was a police officer for 10 days, and then it didn't work out for him. He realized it was definitely not his space. And then he was like, well, what do I do now? And friends and family, aka me and his brother and everyone, were like, oh my God, you are, to the core of your being, you are a teacher. Like, you should go into teaching of some sort. He's been a coach for like a million years. So that's why you're here. Yeah. You can thank me.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sometimes they know best. And then sometimes your friends and family don't know best, as you are trying to build something that they thoroughly do not understand. So follow your, I don't know. I keep hearing people say, this idea has been placed on you for a reason.
Yep.
Now do it.
Yeah.
So that, I'm like, okay, let's go. Let's do this.
I love that.
I want to ask about the podcast a little bit, and more so specifically like your space as a Latina creator. So I guess my first question is, when you are on, or when you're hosting your podcast, like, do you ever like code switch back and forth between Spanish and English? And then I guess like the opposite spectrum of that is like in your content. How do you navigate like being, a pretty powerful Latina woman in the personal finance space, right? Like you're very well known. You obviously have a great brand and you're doing big things. Yet we still have a lot of people that look and sound like me that are the like arbiters of what's right in personal finance, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you navigate that? Like as a Latina woman that's trying to tear down this like white, heteronormative structure and like show that others can do it and have value in the space.
Yeah, I love that you asked this question because when I first started my podcast, I really thought I had to show up like these guys on CNBC, just very formal,
Mhm.
like I'm giving a lecture to a room full of, engineers who are all men, who are all white. And I want to sound really smart and not make any mistakes and make sure my accent from like living in New Jersey doesn't come out. And that got very exhausting very quickly. And I realized, like if I'm going to show up as myself and actually enjoy this, I have to be authentic to who I am. So I started to just shed the expectations of what I thought I should be creating and let myself just show up as I am. So I talk about personal finance on my podcast primarily in English. I have a little Spanglish mixed in, but I grew up here in the States. I speak English. That is my primary language. So I create content that is authentic to my experience as a first generation Latina. It's the first in my family to go to college, the first to work in a high powered career, the first entrepreneur, the first to make six figures as a woman. Like there's a lot of firsts that I've been able to accomplish. And I know, especially like millennial Latinas who are typically having the same experience as me, where they might be the first to go to school and, achieve the higher level career moves and start talking about investing, there's no guidance. And so that's primarily what I try to do with my podcast. It's first off, let's normalize that it's okay to talk about your salary, how much money you're earning in your business, the fact that maybe you earn more than your husband, which is like such a taboo, especially in our community, right? Like that's okay. Let's get away from the shame of having to navigate these frontiers that we have not seen before. Because what happens is, when people are empowered with information, they can change their stories, they can change the narrative. And so I show up as Jannese, the Puerto Rican girl from New Jersey who loves the F-bomb, who doesn't pull punches. Like I don't give a shit. Like I have a duty to myself to show up as me because I feel like that invites the listeners of the podcast and people who follow the platform to show up as themselves. And that can be in the workplace, that can be in their business, that can just be in their relationships with their partners. Maybe they start navigating money from a more empowered place. And that for me is really what it's all about. So we have to be authentic to who we are if we're going to provide real value to the people that we want to serve.
People have told women for so long to just stop being so loud, stop being so much, stop being so successful. And to see you loudly being who you are is really a cool thing.
Thank
So
you.
I appreciate it. And it's inspiring for other women to be like, you know what, you don't have to silence yourself and pretend to be what society wants you to be. You can just show up who you are, and the people who like you will be drawn to you, and those who don't can peace the fuck out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's important too, though, for white men to see it as well. Like, I mean, I think of myself as a pretty liberal dude, and it's important for people like me to like not be like, yeah, I'm super liberal, but like here's another finance bro on my Twitter, here's another we need to see these people in this space and support them and cheer them on, and it's really cool to see that I'm hoping that the tide is slowly changing towards that, because I think most people are waking up to the idea that there are so many different creators out there that provide a ton of value without, like you said, without the shame and the guilt and all of this baggage that comes behind it, where you just feel less than when you're consuming their content, right? Like
Yeah.
there's so many creators that when you consume their content, you're like, oh, like I'm part of a community here. I feel invited in. I feel welcomed in this space. I feel
Right.
supported. Whereas others, it feels very like they're idolized or some kind of like false god. It's really, really weird. And It is. It's just super weird to me. So I'm really thankful that there's people like you that are just like booming
Thank
and
you.
doing it. Yeah, it's really really cool to see.
My ultimate wish is that we don't have to label folks as a Latina money expert, as a female money expert. Like it should just not matter at some
Yeah,
point,
Yeah.
because as we continue to compartmentalize folks, people start to other creators because they feel like, well, maybe that message isn't for them. And the fact is, I've talked to white people, Black people, Latinos, Asian people, people from the LGBTQ community. Nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. I promise you, especially when it comes to money. Okay. None of us are getting the message. So I don't care who you get the message from, as long as it sticks, as long as it resonates. And we don't need to personally, identify with one person or another. It's just whoever talks to you the way that you want to be talked to.
for sure.
Oh, that's
I
that's
love that.
true.
Yeah, there's like that idea of there shouldn't always be the first of this thing, right? Like it should just be like they are a money expert or they are a content creator. We don't need to label it and be like, "Oh, wow, like let's celebrate this." Like, no, let's just celebrate that what they're doing is what they're doing and people are consuming their content not based on the color of their skin or their, sexual orientation or anything like that.
Right. Like
Totally.
I'm still Latina outside of Latinx Heritage Month. So like it doesn't
Yeah.
fucking matter as far as I'm concerned. Like that's not the only time to talk about us.
Oh,
Oh, that's
totally.
great.
So I want to ask you some questions about like life as an engineer, working a side hustle. First off, did your coworkers think you were batshit crazy, or were they? Did they know? Did they know what
No.
was going on? Was it all quiet?
Yeah, I've always been a very much like work is work and personal is personal. So I always felt like this is my thing. I don't need to necessarily tell people what I'm doing, especially since I was doing stuff that was completely outside of like any conflict of interest in my industry. But that's not always the case. Like I've talked to folks who have a desire to start a personal finance brand and they work in the financial industry. There's a lot of conflict there and that can present an issue. But I always feel like unless it's out of necessity for you to tell your job because there is a conflict of interest or whatnot, I say they can mind their own damn business. Like that has nothing to do with them. As long as you're not actually building your business and like conducting client meetings during work hours, like they can worry about what you're doing during 9 to 5 and that's it.
Oh, okay. I love that because a lot of our listeners have some sort of thing that they're doing on the side hustle. I mean, some people have like multiple jobs. Like when you were on your debt free journey, you were working multiple jobs. Some people do DoorDash, whatever. But they have their full time job and then they're making money on the side. And I've actually spoken to a significant amount of people that are like, hey, I'm doing this thing and I would like to do it full time. I just don't really know how and when to take the leap. For you, did you have a bar like, okay, I need to make X amount of dollars a month consistently and then I'll quit my engineering job? Or was it like, okay, I need to replace my engineering salary? Or did you just go for it and we are here today?
Yeah. Well, I definitely had a milestone in mind because that's why I was doing this for 8 years. Like I know there's folks that are like, we'll just jump out of the plane, we'll figure out how to land with the parachute on the way down. That's not my advice. I will never, especially for women of color, like our safety nets are pretty much non-existent, right? Like we don't have family that we can rely on. Like, hey mom, you pay my rent for the next 6 months while I build this business? Like that's just not a thing. So for me, it was a multi-step process. First, I decided to, what is that number going to be? For me, it was like, I need to replace my full-time income. So that was like $120,000 annually at the time. I also wanted to make sure I had a fully funded emergency fund. For me, that was like at least 6 months of expenses. And as I was building my side hustles to the point where I could quit, I didn't let things like lifestyle creep take hold, right? Because just because I was making extra money with the side hustle didn't mean I needed to get a bigger apartment, buy a new car, do all the things that we tend to do when we get extra money. So I was very disciplined in this like idea of, let me keep my expenses in check. Let me not fall for the shiny object syndrome, start buying all these things just because I'm making extra money. And slowly but surely, 2020 was like a game changer type of year. I relaunched the podcast at that point because I had started it in mid 2019 and kind of let it fizzle out because I just wasn't feeling really sure about the direction. 2020, I recommitted. I started consistently showing up, posting episodes every week, doing a lot more on social, doing free events, putting out a ton of content. People started to ask, do you do events? Can I work with you as a coach? Da, 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 da. And it started to become this full-fledged secondary business that I had never imagined when I first was thinking about how I was going to get to the place where I was able to quit my job. So 2020 was also a year where we were all stuck at home and people were cooking a lot of food because we were in quarantine. And that year, my food blog made the most money it had ever made up until that point. It made $85,000 in passive income. And I was like, holy shit, wait a second. Like 85 is almost 100. And, and I'm like, if 100 is almost 120. So like my mind started to extrapolate what could actually be possible in 2021 if this trajectory was continuing. And by the time 2020 had ended, not only had my food blog made $85,000, but I had made like an extra $25,000 through Yo Quiero Dinero in starting to monetize that. So January 21st rolled around. I launched my first digital course. I made $25,000 in 5 days. And I was like, I just made 20. Exactly. I'm like, I just made $25,000 in like a month, in 5 days, really. If I could do this every month of this year, I'm definitely fucking quitting my job. Like, this is not even a question. Okay. Right? So seeing what was possible, that was like the light bulb moment. I knew 2021 was going to be the last year I was going to work. And my original plan was to quit in December of 2021. But a couple of things happened. Namely, I just started getting so many opportunities through the podcast that I had to start taking days off of work to actually accommodate them. And the juggling of both of these things was just not sustainable. And then my coworkers found out that I was getting Instagram famous. And somebody told my boss that I was planning to quit my job because I started talking about it on Instagram. So we actually had a meeting. She called me. She's like, oh my God, I heard you're quitting. Da-da-da, is that true? And I just looked at her like, this is the most awkward fucking thing that could possibly be happening. But maybe this is like the sign from the universe that it's time to go. So I was like, yeah, I am planning on quitting. So here's my resignation letter. And I ended up quitting in April. And best decision ever. Honestly, I'm glad I didn't wait till December because I probably would have lost my mind trying to just do all of these things. And I definitely would have had to say no to opportunities that I had the capacity to accept once I wasn't under the obligations of continuing to show up for the job.
That is so dope. I think it's pretty dope. And I think you're probably right that was probably a sign that, hey, it is time and this has run its course and like the circle is closing and it's going to be time for me to move into my next space. Like, I think you're right that you made the right decision. They're not extending that 8 months and feeling burned out or frustrated or crazy busy, like trying to manage it all. There's just, that would be so much for 8 months. Like, you might as well just make that leap.
Yeah, I think it was also just a light bulb moment for how much money I could actually earn through a side hustle, because at that point it was still a side hustle, even though it was making like a ridiculous amount of money, even more money than I had ever made in a 9-to-5 job. So it just started to reshape like what was possible for me. And it started to really build my own confidence around what I was capable of. Right. And that's why I think it's so important to like give yourself the chance to see how successful you can be. I think a lot of us put some unnecessary pressure on ourselves because we see what other people are doing, or because we just hate our job so much that like, I need to make this work like tomorrow. And it's just, you need to take the pressure off of yourself and just create what you like, create the opposite thing that you are dealing with in your business. Like if you hate doing something, or you hate having a super rigid schedule, or you hate having to show up in a certain way in your 9-to-5, like don't go and recreate that same rat race, that same hamster wheel as an entrepreneur, because then at that point you can't blame anybody else. That's your fault. That's your business that you created that now is like making you a slave to having to show up for stuff. So I think that's also an important tie-in as to why it's super critical to have passive income as a business owner. Because if you have to show up for every single dollar that you earn in your business, you just got another 9-to-5, but you probably are going to work that 24/7 instead. And you're going to be more stressed out having to worry about your benefits and the taxes and all this other shit that you literally just, nobody has time for. Nobody has energy for that.
That's the key right there. That was amazing. So we have what we consider a famous last question that we want to ask you, and you can take this any route. It doesn't have to stick to side hustling or the podcast or anything, but if you could put a stop sign in front of anyone's financial journey to stop them from making a choice or, making some decision, what would you stop someone from doing?
I would say stop questioning something that has been placed in your heart, as Haley said, because that is the thing that held me back when I was trying to figure out, like, how can I show up as an entrepreneur? I kept worrying about other people's opinions. I kept psyching myself out of this idea that I could ever earn more money than this job was going to pay me. I kept psyching myself out of this idea of like, oh my God, what if I give up this pension or these medical benefits? Like, there's no way I can actually create more money. And it's all just bullshit. It's all bullshit that we tell ourselves because we adopt all these
Yep.
limiting beliefs that society puts in us, that our parents or circle of friends, like, shut that shit off. That's what I would say. Shut it off. If you are called to do something, you have an obligation. You have a moral obligation to honor yourself and pursue whatever the hell it is. And whether or not it's a failure, it's a success, I believe in living a life that is full of fun stories, but no regrets.
Yeah.
There's always a fun story that comes out of even shitty things that happen. And the sooner we, just let go of the pressure of things having to show up and be what we think, I think the more we will live absolutely fulfilled lives.
I love that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for tying a bow on that. That was incredible. Yeah, that was great.
So where can our toasties find you and connect with you and explore some of your digital courses and find your podcast
And your blog
and make some of your
affiliate
food.
marketing. Yeah.
Yes. So my two brands are Delish D'lites and Yo Quiero Dinero. So if you want Puerto Rican and Latin inspired recipes, that is Delish, DLITES, delights.com. And my personal finance podcast is called Yo Quiero Dinero. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. And you can find all of my digital courses and all the other things I have going on at YoQuieroDineroPodcast.com.
Awesome. One final question, just like a little teaser for the listeners. What's your favorite recipe? What are you like, yo, if you're going to go to the blog, this is the one you want to find right now?
So Puerto Ricans are not known for like having a very plant-based, veggie heavy cuisine. So I will say this, don't be scared by the fact that our culture is just full of carbs and fried things. One of my absolute favorite recipes is called Pastillon, and it is essentially a lasagna, but instead of noodles, you use sweet plantains that are cut like in a long length and fried. And then you put cheese and meat, and it's like a casserole. You put it in the oven. It's great for parties. And it's like, once you have that, you'll never go back to a traditional lasagna, like ever.
My mouth is legit watering. Like I was like, what? Oh my God.
Mr. Culinary School is about to go make that.
Yeah, I'm like I'm about to go to the freaking market down here and be like, you guys got plantains?
They do.
Yeah, somebody's down there with me like, you're talking about a banana? Like, no, it's not a banana. Stop. That's too funny. Oh my gosh. Well, Jannese, thank you so much for coming on today. It's such a pleasure to meet you and hear about all the awesome things you're doing. You've got 2 fans over here that are supporting you hardcore, and we just really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. This was so fun.
Definitely. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Price of Avocado Toast. If you vibed with this episode, share it with a friend that you're comfortable having money talks with. And if you don't mind, we'd love if you could rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you're in need of my support as a financial coach, message me on Instagram. I'd love to help in any way that I can. Until next time.